Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. Juventus, Napoli, the race for the Scudetto is getting hot and it's very tight and it looks like it may go down to the wire. But what about the other teams? There's a team in third who looks like they're pulling away and are going to secure a Champions League spot without being in a fight for European football, and that team is Roma. What makes them good? What separates them from the rest of the sides in Serie A? How do they function? What system do they play in? What are their weaknesses? Don't worry, here at the interviews we've got you covered. So on this edition of the interviews, I'm going to briefly break down AS Roma. So ahead of their big match against Shakhtar in the Champions League round of 16, we look at AS Roma. What's going right for them this year? What's going wrong? What's been going on with their form in the recent few weeks? When we look at the board, we got Roma in the red. Basically, Roma usually playing a 4-3-3 or a 4-2-3-1. Their formation usually sees Edin Dzeko up front, but sometimes Schick could play up front as well. Out wide, they roam between Under, and they have Parati or El Shaarawy on the flanks. And midfield, it's usually De Rossi, Nainggolan, and Strootman. But there have been times when they do play 4-2-3-1. They have Strootman up front, and it would either be, they have Nainggolan up front, it would either be Strootman and Pellegrini, or Pellegrini and De Rossi in midfield. Sometimes you have De Rossi and Strootman. They roam between the two. And at the back, their best back four stems from Florenzi on the right, Kolarov on the left, and in center back they'll have Manolas and Fazio. Sometimes Jesus moves there, and we've seen recently Jesus move to left back as well when players aren't available, and then in goal the incredible Alisson. So what goes right for Roma? Who are they? What are they? Basically, Roma look at their best when they play on the counterattack. When we look at arguably their best result in recent weeks, it was against Napoli. They drop into a 4-5-1. What was so impressive about that was that when Napoli were going forward, Napoli were more of a 4-3-3. What Roma really struggled at in the first half was the fact that they weren't stopping Jorginho. Jorginho was being able to get on the ball, move it around, play balls over the top, get in behind the defense, and then have them play pullbacks from the flanks. So what they did was in the first half they struggled, but in the second half they had different players press onto him. Different players in the midfield would be Nainggolan, De Rossi, Strootman. They took turns pressing onto Jorginho. For the most part, it was Nainggolan, and that was very key in what they did because they nullified Jorginho in the second half, and he wasn't able to dictate the game like he did in the first half, and that really stopped them. But it's the fact that in their midfield, they have Nainggolan, Strootman, De Rossi, players that are ball winners. They offer strength, they offer grit, they could really break down the lines, and they can ensure that nothing goes through that midfield. But what they lack is obviously the creativity. But in that sense, they're there, they could sit deep, they have the experience, and that's key. And the fact that their defense isn't that great, they need a solid center. And that's why when they played against Napoli, that was arguably one of their better performances of the season, because Napoli is one of the best, if not the best attacking side in Italy and one of the most exciting sides in Europe, and they really nullified what they did. And the fact that they could do that shows that there's potential there. The problem with Roma is that they struggle breaking down teams. When we look at another week, when they played AC Milan, Milan did the opposite and dropped in the 4-5-1. And that's what they've done with Gennaro Gattuso coming in, very narrow, and Roma basically struggled to get anything going. And we saw somewhat of that against Torino as well. And what happens is that they'll have the wide players there, the midfield players there, but they don't really get anything from the center of the pitch, and they'll have players pick up De Rossi. So even though he plays those sweeping balls to the flanks, what are they really getting from the flanks? Because they have the wide players protecting in those areas, and even if the fullbacks go forward, they'll switch off. And teams really cover those flanks well. And that's the problem, is that with that going on, they don't really have anything going. Dzeko lacks service. And when teams sit deeper, Roma just don't know how to break them down. And that was a big issue against Milan. Milan beat them 2-0. Against Torino, obviously it was a different story. But with Torino, what happened was that they scored in different ways. You had the Manolas goal where he scored from a cross from Florenzi. And then you look at the chance where Nainggolan knocks the ball over the defense, and De Rossi's unmarked in the box, and he scores that and finishes from there. And then when you look at the final goal, what really changes that is that they're basically playing on the counterattack, right? So that's how Roma got by that option in that sense against Torino. But against Milan, we really saw them stifled and struggling in that aspect. Then we look at when they play Udinese, and that's a different formation that they really handle, and that's a 3-5-2. And it was very impressive to see what they did there, was that they played from the front. They played from the front, and what they did was that they pressed. They had players press in from there, and then when you look at it from that aspect, they pressed from the front, so they ensured that nothing was going through those areas. And then what had happened was that the fullbacks would push onto the wingbacks, and then that would happen in midfield, and they ensured that Udinese couldn't play out the back, and that was very key to what they did in that respect. And the goals that they scored against Udinese, again, you have the Under chance where there's no one really closes him down, so he finishes, and then you have the player making a mistake and Nangolan stepping in, dispossessing him, and then Perotti scores, and that changes the game from that aspect, and it's 2-0 late in the game, and they defeat Udinese in that way. So again, they press high, they still struggle to create chances from that regard, but they rely on Under's brilliance, and they rely on a defensive error. So what is this Napoli? What is this Roma side? When we really look at them, in the 4-3-3, what do they offer? We showed you what the midfield offers. Up front, you have Edin Dzeko, and the way they like to attack is that if they're not getting crosses from the wing, from the fullbacks, because the fullbacks actually are better going forward than they are defensively. Florenzi's not a natural right back. Kolarov is renowned for his crossing and a set piece taking more than his defending, so they get crosses from there, and that's their width. That's necessarily their width, because El Shaarawy is a counter-attacking forward who likes to cut in. Under likes to cut in. He likes to pick up positions in these areas. If we break them down and put them into more of a 4-5-1, then we could see it better there, is that if they're narrow, he'll like to drop into these areas here to get the ball and run on goal, or like to move into those positions or make runs into that position. And then if not, they have Perotti, who likes to drift into midfield, into central areas laterally, or drop a bit deeper to get on the ball. And then you have Dzeko or Schick. Obviously Dzeko is better at doing this, but his all-round play where he could drop deep, get on the ball, and he'll look to turn and play in the wide players, and that's what Edin Dzeko does well. And the fact that he's also very good in the box, when you look at how they beat Napoli, it kind of summed up what they do best. They won the ball in midfield, ball slid into Under, on the counter, cuts in, shots deflected. Obviously that doesn't really give him justice, but that shows how they broke them down. You look at a Florenzi cross into Dzeko, does well to get across his marker and nod over Albiol and nod the ball into the net. You look at their third goal, it's a cross. Well, it's Dzeko not closed down, and he finishes from that regard. And look at their fourth goal. It's Kolarov getting forward, delivering a cross that isn't cleared properly, and it falls to the player, and he fires it into the net. And that's how Napoli really that's how Roma really operate, and that's very key. And when you look at it, that's why they kind of struggle to win games, because they don't have creativity in the midfield. They rely on Dzeko to do that. And the fact is their defense makes a lot of errors. Fazio and Manolas aren't reliable. They've given up a lot of goals that this season, or made a lot of mistakes that make you really question why they are the starting center backs, and maybe they need to improve that area if they want to compete for the Scudetto or go far in the Champions League. But it's the fact that Alisson has been superb this season, making tons of great saves to keep them in games. You look at the Napoli game, for instance. You look at the Shakhtar game, and even though you look at the Shakhtar game, a great way to really emphasize what they do. The way they scored the goal after dominating the first half, Dzeko drops off, wins the ball, sees Under making the run across, plays him in, he beats the goalkeeper. That's a goal. Under has really been a bright spot for Roma this season, struggling as of late, but a month ago or a month and a half ago, he was really on fire. And then you look at the goal they concede. Fullbacks very high, simple ball through. Simple ball through, runner gets onto it, defender comes over, Fazio gets beat with ease, 1-1. That's what we're talking about with Roma. Sometimes it's just too easy to score on them. The fullbacks get high, there's space in these areas, and the midfield, for all the work for how good they are defensively and winning the ball and being gritty and ensuring that they're compact in the center of the pitch. They lack mobility, and when Angolan is higher up pressing, Strootman and De Rossi don't have the legs, and teams are able to counter them and get behind them. We look at what Torino did with Falque, constantly just running into this space constantly on several occasions. Torino were unfortunate not to go ahead, him and Bellotti combining, and that is where Roma struggle, and that's going to be the big thing for them in the second leg against Shakhtar, who have a very good counterattack. And even if they get past that, you look at other teams in the Champions League, Manchester City, Liverpool, Real Madrid. These are teams that are very good on the counterattack, and if Roma play this very high line, or they go and push an attack, these are the areas that they're going to struggle in, because De Rossi, Strootman don't really have the legs to get across and cover it, and then Manolas and Fazio in 1v1 situations isn't what you want. But that's what you get from Roma. Very good on the counterattack, very compact when they need to be, and they sit deep. When they go forward, they leave spaces in these areas. That's not good. The center backs aren't reliable. Alisson is a fantastic goalkeeper. And then when you look up front, Dzeko offers the all-round game that you need from a center forward. Schick looks like he's going to be able to do the same as he grows in wide areas. They look to get him behind, and they're very counterattacking, and then Perotti could come in and he drifts laterally, whereas when you look at it from that aspect, they lack creativity in those areas, and that's why they struggle to score. But let me know what you guys think. Meet me in the comments below. Don't forget I upload videos every day, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And that was your daily dose of the interviews.